When you're climbing towards something that matters, a vision, a dream, a standard of excellence, the fall feels sharp. It stings, it disorients you. You start to question the point of it all. But here's the truth. We fall because there's something inside the fall we were never going to learn on the rise. Falling is the moment when the illusion breaks. You stop pretending you have it all together. You stop performing for the expectations of others. You stop carrying strategies that no longer serve you. What you're left with isn't weakness, it's clarity, it's focus. It's the raw material for something real. That's where the design begins again. That's where reinvention lives. You don't fall to be punished. You fall to be reshaped. Every successful product I've ever been involved in was born after something failed. Spectacularly, publicly, sometimes painfully, but in that failure was a message. Something was misaligned, the market didn't respond, the team didn't gel, the timing was wrong, the solution was incomplete. If we had succeeded on the first try, we wouldn't have fixed it. We wouldn't have found the version that mattered, the version people actually needed. So why do we fall? Because failure tells the truth that success often hides. We get addicted to progress. We crave momentum, but momentum without meaning is just noise. It's movement without insight. The fall forces us to slow down, to zoom in, to ask, what was I ignoring? What was I clinging to that no longer serves this mission? Let me tell you, the hardest falls aren't external. They're internal, when you let yourself down, when your standards slip, when you compromise on something you once swore you'd never bend on. That moment when you see it, when you feel it, it hurts. But if you let it, it also builds something much stronger. Integrity isn't built when things go well. It's forged in the moments you choose who you'll be after things break. Falling also humbles you. And humility is rocket fuel. You stop pretending you don't need help. You start asking better questions. You start seeing your blind spots not as weaknesses, but as opportunities for partnership. You begin to understand that no one builds something great alone. And that failure isn't a flaw, it's an invitation. We live in a culture that tries to sanitize failure, to soften it, but that's not how it works. It's messy, it's personal, it hits your pride, but it also clears the stage. When the ego falls, what rises is purpose, and that shift is everything. You stop working to prove something. You start building something that actually matters. So, why do we fall? We fall so we can rise right. We fall to shed what's false. We fall to uncover the design beneath the default. We fall because falling is how we move forward with intention. And when you rise not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly, you bring with you something no shortcut can give you: wisdom, depth, vision. And that vision will outlast talent, trends, or timing. It will become the foundation of something people feel, not just use. That's the difference between noise and legacy. You fall, you get up. But you're not the same, you're better. When everything is going well, when plans are flowing, when applause is loud, when performance is up, it's easy to believe that everything matters. We give equal weight to the trivial and the essential. We overvalue attention and underestimate alignment. But when we fall, when we experience a loss, a breakdown, or failure, the clarity that emerges is often sharper than anything success can provide. Falling removes the excess. It forces a reset, and in that space, we start to see with honesty what actually holds value. When structures collapse, priorities are redefined. In the absence of momentum, we ask deeper questions. We no longer chase metrics that don't reflect our real goals. The meeting that once felt urgent now feels irrelevant. The noise of performance is replaced by the quiet of reflection. In this stripped-down version of ourselves, we see what remains. And what remains is what matters. The people who stayed, the values we refused to trade, the parts of the work that gave us energy, not just validation. Falling tests our identity. When success is removed, we are confronted with the question, who are we without the win? If the title, the stage, the position, the platform disappears, what's left? For many, this question is terrifying, but it's also freeing, because in answering it, we separate our worth from our results. We begin to rebuild identity not on output, but on character. Falling removes the mask, and when the mask is gone, truth walks in. The experience of failure tends to simplify things. It narrows the field. It removes distractions. What we once thought was essential now feels unnecessary. We begin to understand that productivity without purpose is a form of burnout, that approval from others is never a substitute for alignment with self, that success without peace is just well-branded misery. These realizations are hard, won, but they are only available on the other side of the fall. In relationships, falling reveals who truly shows up. When things go wrong, the audience thins out. Not everyone sticks around, and that's a gift. The people who stay when you're not winning, those are the ones who matter. In failure, we see who was connected to the mission and who was connected only to the momentum. This insight allows us to rebuild trust with precision, to place loyalty where it's earned, not just assumed. In the professional world, falling resets leadership. A leader who has never failed is untested. They may be admired, but they haven't yet developed depth. Once a leader falls, their vision is tempered by humility. Their strategy is shaped by empathy. They stop speaking in certainty and start leading with questions. They learn to listen not just to feedback, but to the unspoken. They become less interested in being impressive and more focused on being impactful. Falling builds that shift. It sharpens focus. It matures perspective. Falling also reveals internal motives. Before the fall, it's easy to confuse ambition with purpose. We chase goals because we're told they matter: revenue, status, scale. But when it all breaks, we look closer. We begin to ask, why was I doing this in the first place? What part of this still resonates when the reward is gone? What part of this feels authentic even when no one is watching? These questions don't arise in comfort. They arise in discomfort, and they are the doorway to realigned direction. There is a point in every fall when we are forced to choose between denial and clarity. We can pretend nothing is broken, or we can examine the break. The people who grow, the ones who come back stronger, are those who choose clarity. They don't sugarcoat the loss, they dissect it. They extract the insight. They ask, what is this trying to show me about myself? About my priorities, about my design? That clarity is what makes the fall worth it. It doesn't make it painless, but it makes it purposeful, because when we fall, what we gain isn't just toughness, it's truth. The truth about what gives our work meaning. The truth about who we are when it's quiet. The truth about where to go next and what to leave behind. And that truth, more than success, is what sustains us when we rise again. Failure is often seen as the end, a signal to stop, to retreat, to accept defeat, but that's a misreading of its function. Failure isn't a full stop, it's a form of information. It is feedback at its most honest. Success tends to whisper. Failure, on the other hand, speaks with volume and clarity. It gives us precise data, not just about what went wrong, but about what matters, what's missing, and what needs to evolve. When you shift your perspective from judgment to learning, failure becomes the most valuable teacher in the room. Every failed product, missed opportunity, or broken plan is filled with insight. When you examine it closely without defensiveness, without ego, you begin to see patterns. You begin to notice assumptions that didn't hold up. You find weaknesses in execution, blind spots in strategy, or signals you ignored. The moment you treat failure as a feedback loop, it stops being a threat and starts being a blueprint. It doesn't just show you what didn't work, it guides you toward what will. Failure delivers precision. It is specific in a way that vague wins rarely are. When something breaks, you are forced to look deeper. Why didn't the customer respond? Why did the system collapse under stress? Why did the team disengage? These are not soft questions. They are structural. They point to root causes, and solving for those causes builds capability that lasts far beyond a single project or cycle. In personal growth, failure operates like a mirror. It reflects your habits, your mindset, your beliefs under pressure. You see how you react, not just what you do, but what you feel. Do you retreat into self-doubt? Do you blame others, or do you take responsibility and start redesigning? These reactions matter, because the way you process failure determines the speed and depth of your next transformation. The quicker you move from reaction to reflection, the stronger your response becomes. Organizations that understand failure as feedback create cultures of innovation. They encourage experiments, not just execution. They destigmatize trial and error. They measure not just success rates, but learning velocity, how quickly the team extracts insight from setbacks and iterates forward. In these environments, failure doesn't stop momentum. It refines it. It fuels a smarter second attempt, and over time, that cycle of iteration produces solutions that no safe, failure-free strategy ever could. Leaders who embrace failure as feedback model a different kind of strength. They admit when something didn't work. They share what they learned. They normalize recalibration. This creates psychological safety, not to fail without accountability, but to fail without shame. And in that space, people take creative risks. They offer bold ideas. They speak honestly about what's not working. That kind of dialogue is the oxygen of hyper-forming teams. On a personal level, failure also serves as a values check. It asks, were you pursuing the right thing for the right reason? Sometimes failure is not a sign that your dream was too big, it's a sign that your motivation was misaligned. You may have chased validation instead of impact. You may have measured success by someone else's definition. The failure, in that case, isn't a loss, it's a course correction. It's your system flagging a mismatch between your actions and your values. Not all failure feels fair. Sometimes you do everything right, and it still falls apart. Timing collapses, the market shifts, a key partner backs out. These moments feel like betrayal, but even here, failure contains information. It tells you about your resilience threshold. It shows you where you depended too much on variables you didn't control. It teaches you to build structures that are more adaptive, more robust, and more aligned with changing conditions. The most dangerous part of failure is not the moment itself, it's what comes after. If you internalize it as identity, you become paralyzed. If you treat it as feedback, you become sharper. The difference lies in interpretation. Failure is an event, not a verdict. It is input, and the way you respond to that input determines whether it becomes weight or wisdom. When failure arrives, the goal isn't to avoid the discomfort. The goal is to use it, to extract insight, to revise the plan, to re-enter with more precision, more clarity, and more depth. Feedback, in its rawest form, doesn't flatter. But it builds the kind of excellence that can't be replicated by shortcuts or surface wins. Comfort feels like progress, but it rarely is. Growth doesn't live in equilibrium, it lives in disruption. When we're balanced, we optimize. We repeat what's familiar, we avoid risk, we perform but we don't stretch. Learning only begins when something destabilizes our assumptions, challenges our systems, or forces us into new territory. Discomfort is not a symptom of failure, it's a prerequisite for real learning. Being off balance means facing a gap between what we thought we knew and what reality is demanding from us now. That gap is uncomfortable. It exposes what's untested, what's weak, or what's missing, but it also creates an opening, an opportunity to build something new not just around us, but within us. The mind becomes alert, habits get questioned, patterns break. The learning that takes place in that tension is deeper, more permanent, and more transformative than anything learned in stability. In stable systems, we operate on autopilot. We rely on what we've done before. In off-balance moments, whether it's a failed launch, a personal setback, or a shift in market dynamics, the autopilot switches off. We're forced to take manual control. We start asking better questions. What's actually happening here? What's no longer working? What assumptions am I still clinging to that no longer apply? These are not theoretical questions. They are strategic, essential, and urgent. When we're off balance, learning speeds up. The brain becomes more receptive, the ego steps back. Feedback is no longer optional, it becomes survival data. You're no longer trying to be right, you're trying to understand. You stop defending, and you start absorbing. This shift is powerful because it's not just about adapting to new information. It's about evolving the way you think. You begin to rewire your response patterns not just for the current challenge, but for the ones you haven't even encountered yet. Great innovators, founders, and builders spend more time off balance than most. They don't chase failure, but they don't fear it either. They place themselves in environments that stretch their thinking. They deliberately pursue what they don't yet understand. They invite critique. They launch before they're ready, not recklessly, but intentionally, because they know that mastery is forged through friction. Staying too long in comfort dulls the edge. Innovation dies when learning stops, and learning stops when everything feels familiar. Being off balance is often mistaken for weakness, but it is, in fact, strength in motion. It means you're reaching beyond what you can currently support. That reach matters because it's where skill development begins. Confidence that's never been tested is fragile. Conviction that's never been questioned is shallow. The process of destabilization reveals the depth of what you truly know and where your gaps lie. Those gaps are not flaws, they're invitations. Leadership, too, is shaped by imbalance. A leader who only operates in stable conditions will struggle the moment the landscape shifts. But a leader who has learned through instability becomes adaptable. They don't panic. They don't cling to outdated playbooks. They observe, recalibrate, and act with informed intuition. They become the calm within the storm, not because they were born that way, but because they trained that way. And that training happened during imbalance. Off-balance moments also teach resilience, not just bouncing back, but recalibrating under pressure. It's one thing to persist when the path is clear. It's another to navigate when the road disappears. In that space, resourcefulness is born, creativity sharpens, vision becomes more grounded. You stop trying to control the environment and start learning how to move within it. That kind of resilience doesn't come from books. It comes from being in the arena disoriented, exposed, and still choosing to move forward. In education, the most lasting learning comes from struggle. The answer you had to wrestle with stays longer than the answer that was handed to you. The presentation that failed teaches more than the one that earned applause. The product that broke reveals more than the one that barely got tested. Every lesson gained under tension stays with you because it was earned, not memorized, but metabolized. Off balance is where self-awareness grows. You start noticing your default reactions. Do you avoid? Do you deflect? Do you overcompensate? Or do you pause, observe, and reorient? The process of regaining balance teaches more than balance itself. Because in learning to stand again, you learn how to carry more. You become more centered, more fluid, more aware, not because things are easy, but because you've learned how to remain grounded when they're not. Resilience doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's not something you're born with in full form. It's not luck, and it's not a genetic gift. It's a skill forged slowly, deliberately, and often painfully. Every challenge, every fall, every setback is a layer in the structure. Some people may appear naturally resilient, but what you're really seeing is the result of unspoken repetition, the internal choice, again and again, to get back up, recalibrate, and move forward when giving up would have been easier. The early versions of resilience are small. It starts with tolerating discomfort, then it evolves into navigating complexity, then it becomes emotional stamina, the capacity to face what's uncomfortable without disengaging or collapsing. Each time you endure something difficult, you lay down another layer of inner strength. The process isn't glamorous. It often looks like self-doubt, frustration, tears behind closed doors, silent recalculations, and moments of solitude. But inside that experience, something fundamental is being constructed, the quiet infrastructure of endurance. Resilience is also behavioral. It's not just about grit or toughness. It's about decisions, the micro decisions that shape how you respond under pressure. Do you pause or react? Do you process or suppress? Do you engage with the situation or run from it? The accumulation of these responses forms your resilience profile. Each response is an opportunity to add either weakness or strength to that framework. And over time, you begin to carry more weight with less collapse. There's no shortcut to building resilience because it requires friction. Just like muscle growth requires resistance, inner strength requires stress, not overwhelming, but enough to stretch your current limits. If you're always protected, always comfortable, you never develop the tools to face reality. When difficulty arrives, and it always does, you won't know how to stand. Building resilience means consciously stepping into discomfort, not for its own sake, but for the growth it activates. Failure is one of the most consistent architects of resilience. When something doesn't go as planned, you're confronted with a choice: break or adapt. That decision point is where resilience gets built. It teaches you how to sit in uncertainty, how to operate without control, how to stay focused when your environment is loud with fear and doubt. The more times you engage with that space, the more capacity you build. You stop needing things to be perfect before you begin. Resilience also includes emotional regulation. It's not the denial of emotions, it's the skill of managing them. You learn how to sit with disappointment without letting it define your direction. You learn how to feel fear and still move. You learn how to honor grief but not become paralyzed by it. Emotional resilience isn't a suppression of feeling. It's a deepened relationship with it. It's what allows you to stay present and engaged when your instincts are screaming for escape. Resilience is amplified by perspective. When you develop the ability to reframe, you reclaim power. You begin to see challenges not as punishments, but as pressure tests. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this here to teach me?" That shift doesn't remove the pain, but it transforms its function. Pain becomes productive. You stop running from discomfort and start mining it for wisdom, insight, and strength. Mentorship and community influence the speed of resilience development. Resilient people often have a support system not to protect them from struggle, but to remind them of who they are when they forget. Feedback from mentors, encouragement from peers, and accountability from those who have walked similar paths all help shape how we endure and rebound. But even with support, resilience is still self-earned. No one can give it to you. It has to be practiced, proven, and owned. One of the most powerful traits of resilient people is adaptability. They're not rigid. They don't insist on the old plan just because it once worked. They observe the changing environment and pivot. They let go of what no longer serves them. This is a learned trait. It's the result of practicing detachment, the skill of not linking your identity to your original idea. Flexibility under pressure is not natural for most people. It's something built through continuous exposure to disruption and the choice to respond rather than resist. Resilience is a quiet trait. It doesn't always look heroic. It often looks like a person showing up to work the day after bad news, like continuing a project even after rejection, like rewriting the pitch after 3 failed meetings. These aren't grand gestures, they're repetitions of strength. Over time, they form a person who doesn't collapse in the face of difficulty, but instead meets it with clarity, energy, and the internal structure to keep moving.